August 29th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's policy briefing and press conference. The South Korean leader is set to address the nation on the government's goals and progress in key reform policies, including pension, labor, health, education, and birth rate. He's also having a Q&A session with Korean and foreign media with no limitations on topics. The Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 10 Palestinians have been killed in a major operation by Israeli forces in the north of the occupied West Bank. The UN Food Agency is halting Gaza-style movements in the Gaza Strip after its team came under fire near an Israeli checkpoint. Paris is once again bustling with the 2024 Paralympics and now in full swing. About 4,400 athletes from a record 168 delegations will be chasing gold in 22 Paralympic sports. President Yoon is set to deliver a policy briefing and press conference in the coming hour to highlight his administration's major policy tasks. He will address the nation, focusing on the government's goals and progress and reforming the public pension system, the labor environment, the medical sector, and education, as well as improving the nation's chronically low birth rate. Now, in particular, Yoon is expected to lay out the direction of the government's pension reform plan, as the current National Pension Fund is projected to run out by the year 2055. The officials said the president's speech will touch upon themes including people's livelihoods, public safety, reform, and communication. This will be followed by a news conference with Korean and foreign media. Stay tuned for our live coverage at 10 a.m. Korea time. With more victims of digital crimes using deepfake images turning out to be young students in school, the Education Ministry has rolled up its sleeves, warning that student offenders could even be expelled for committing crimes against fellow students. Our Song Yujin has more.
Regarding the recent increase in digital sex crimes using sexually explicit deepfake images, South Korea's Education Ministry warned that student offenders committing crimes against fellow students in school will face high levels of disciplinary action, including expulsion. Mr. Kim Do-hyung, who leads the ministry's school violence response team at a related briefing on Wednesday, added that such crimes are highly likely to be very intentional and damaging. In addition to expulsion, other possible disciplinary actions include mandatory voluntary hours, special education or counseling, and school transfers. The type of actions against offenders will depend on factors such as the severity of damage, as well as the duration and the intentionality of the offense. Referring to recent deepfake abuse cases where many offenders were found to be law-breaching minors without criminal responsibility, he said this will also be an opportunity to discuss such matters. Law-breaching minors are teens from ages 10 to 14 subject to protective disposition instead of criminal penalty. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the police began 7 days of special control and investigation into deepfake sex crimes. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Now, over in Parliament, in what is the first bipartisan accord of the current National Assembly, lawmakers on Wednesday approved an array of bills to improve people's daily lives. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
On Wednesday, the 22nd National Assembly representatives were hard at work, hammering out 28 pieces of legislation that will impact many aspects of people's lives, tackling pending issues in real estate, energy, medical service, and more. In a rare show of consensus, all 295 lawmakers present at the plenary session voted to provide greater support for the victims of real estate rental scams. A revision to an existing act, this will guarantee the victims up to 20 years of residence in the property they've rented. Another proposal restricting the rights of parents to inherit their deceased sons or daughters' money and assets when they do not sufficiently carry out their parental duties passed with strong support. The so-called Kuhara bill is named after the late K-pop star, whose mother and brother disputed over who would inherit the singer's money after her death. And perhaps the most fiercely debated, the revision to the current Nursing Act, which was tabled after a last-minute agreement in a late-night meeting of the Health and Welfare Committee. The rival lawmakers met halfway just hours before the plenary session and agreed to provide the legal basis for further medical practice by nurses who qualify to act as physician assistants.
This defines the additional roles of nurses with qualifying professional, clinical, and educational experience in providing medical service under a doctor's general guidance or delegation.
The Nursing Act aims to protect them so they can put all their attention and focus on providing medical care to patients and thereby ultimately protect the lives and health of the people.
This comes at an especially critical time as South Korea deals with a shortage of medical personnel at major hospitals after many doctors resigned in protest of medical school enrollment expansion, and just a day before the nurses planned protests calling for better working conditions. A goal since the previous assembly, the revision passed with 283 lawmakers voting for, 2 against, and 5 abstaining in an unprecedented bipartisan move toward a coalition by the current assembly.
But tensions still linger as the rival lawmakers prepare to discuss potential agendas for the much-anticipated meeting between their party leaders, PPP's Han and DP's Lee, which is expected in weeks. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Israel continues its offensive in the occupied West Bank, with large-scale raids and airstrikes being carried out on Wednesday. The UN Food Agency is also halting Gaza staff movement in the Gaza Strip after its team came under fire near an Israeli checkpoint. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With Israel continuing its offensives in Gaza, its military is also expanding attacks in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli military on Wednesday carried out raids and airstrikes in northern regions of the West Bank, killing at least 10 Palestinians. The Israel Defense Forces said that it was part of a counter-terror operation, combining the use of drones and bulldozers, but also military and security forces. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz said the latest operation aims to thwart Islamic Iranian terrorist infrastructure, adding that Tehran was looking to form an eastern front against Israel. He added that threats in the West Bank must be dealt with in the same way as in Gaza. An IDF spokesperson said Wednesday that Israel had identified the smuggling of weapons and explosives into the region by Iran. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza may further worsen, as the World Food Program announced it will be halting all aid movement in the enclave. This comes as one of its vehicles was hit with repeated gunfire close to an Israeli checkpoint. The agency said that despite the vehicle being clearly marked and having received multiple clearances by Israeli authorities to approach the checkpoint, the vehicle was fired at repeatedly. None of the passengers were harmed, but an image released by the WFP showed that at least 10 bullets hit the vehicle. The agency has been crucial in its distribution of food throughout Gaza, as famine has been widespread for months. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also reported Wednesday that the Israeli military bombed a car passing through a Syrian border checkpoint near the Lebanese border, killing 4 people. The Civil War Monitoring Group said a car exploded in a drone attack and that 3 Palestinians and 1 Lebanese national were killed. However, according to a Reuters report citing a local security source, the 3 Palestinians were members of the Islamic Jihad, while the Lebanese national was a member of Hezbollah. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he's charting a plan to end the war with Russia. Now, what kind of deal could such a plan include, and how realizable will that be? Joining us for more is Professor Robert English. Good afternoon to you, Professor English.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us. According to Zelenskyy on Tuesday, Ukraine's incursion into Russia's specific Kursk region was all a part of Kyiv's victory plan. What does he mean by that victory plan?
What I think he means is that he wants to convince his Western backers that Ukraine still can achieve victory. So it's part of a persuasion, a public relations naming. Unfortunately, I think most analysts don't think that's credible anymore, and that some kind of negotiated settlement is approaching soon. And the Ukrainians are pushing hard, to hang on as long as they can and try to keep that Western support flowing and fend off pressure to strike a deal with Russia.
Well, what Zelenskyy is planning to do is that he's going to propose a peace plan to the U.S. next month to, technically end the war with Russia. Professor English, what do you think will be included in Ukraine's peace plan this time?
I don't think Zelenskyy himself even knows yet. It depends on how the battle progresses. Ukraine scored an impressive tactical victory by grabbing this huge swath of territory, right? 1,000 square kilometers in a very short time. But then they bogged down, and questions have been raised about how long they can hold that territory as Russia methodically begins pushing back. Well, meanwhile, in central Ukraine, in the Donetsk region, they continue to lose territory. So the longer this goes on, the weaker Ukraine's hand becomes. And of course, Zelenskyy was hoping for a better outcome to give him, a better bargaining position. He has improved his hand a little bit with this surprise invasion of Russia. But remember, Ukraine holds less than 0.5% of Russian territory, while Russia holds over 20% of Ukraine. So what kind of bargaining chip can that be?
It looks like he is really betting on the progress of the war. Now, then I have to ask you, why is he planning to propose the deal to, U.S. President Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Kamala Harris? Is it because he's trying to pressure the U.S.?
Of course, he's trying to pressure, to convince, to maintain support. I think it's actually a clever move to appeal to all American leaders, both former President Trump, current President Biden, and perhaps future President Harris. That makes it more of a bipartisan issue. It makes it harder for Trump or Harris or Biden to break away and criticize the others. So I think for Zelenskyy, this is important. And what he's signaling is that even if Trump wins, he expects continuity. Trump will be pushed to confirm that we still support Ukraine. If it's going to be Kamala Harris, Biden's successor, the same thing. He's trying to sort of lock in a continued position of America supporting Ukraine with this sort of diplomatic tactic. It's actually quite clever, I think.
Well, at the same time, Ukraine is reportedly looking to invite Russia to its second peace summit that is set to be held in November. Why is Ukraine inviting Russia this time? It didn't last time, the first time.
Yeah, well, again, these previous conferences, as you mentioned, the last time Russia wasn't there. And because Russia wasn't there, neither was China and other major players. So it became a very one-sided peace conference. It was really just a talking show and not a serious peace conference. Of course, ultimately, if you're having a conference, if you're having negotiations between two adversaries, then both adversaries have to be there.
Right.
So maybe it's a sign that we're reaching the point of a real negotiation, that the Ukrainians have agreed to something they have refused to do before, which is sit down with the aggressor, Vladimir Putin.
In the meantime, Ukraine also staged its first test of a domestically made ballistic missile. Now, no details are yet to be revealed, but how threatening is this? I mean, why is Zelenskyy making this progress public?
Yeah, well, every little thing that can show strength, more military support, new military innovation can't hurt Ukraine's image. But I don't think anyone expects this is some killer weapon or game-changing military system. Ukraine has had missile technology. Ukraine was an important center of rocket motor production in the old Soviet days. And they have produced other missiles and drones and military systems before. So this is one more, but there's no intelligence suggesting that it's something game-changing that Russia will be afraid of.
Alrighty, Professor English, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a wonderful afternoon there.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
South Korea's birth rate bucked recent trends, growing for the first time in nearly 9 years, with the number of marriages also seeing record growths. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
Some positive news regarding the country's population crisis, as the number of marriages and births surged in the second quarter of 2024. Data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday showed that the total number of births between April and June this year came to just under 57,000, an increase of 1.2% compared to the same period last year. It's the first time since the fourth quarter of 2015 that the number of births in South Korea has grown year on year by quarter. The number of births in June recorded an all-time low for the month of June, but the number of births in April and May saw a rise, which is what led to the overall increase for the second quarter. There were also more marriages in the same period this year, with just under 56,000 between April and June, which is an increase of more than 17% compared to the second quarter of 2023. This is the largest year-on-year jump in the number of marriages for any quarter. A spokesperson from Statistics Korea attributed the surge in the number of births and marriages to not only a backlog caused by COVID-19 restrictions, which meant weddings were delayed, but also to various efforts from the Yoon administration to tackle the population crisis with benefits for married couples. One expert says that another big factor behind the rising number of marriages could be the current demographic.
There were a lot of births around 1992. So there's a large number of people in the age group looking to get married. The number of births could rise slightly because there are so many people in the age group that can give birth.
But it could be too soon to celebrate just yet. Last year, the total fertility rate, which is defined as the average number of children that are born to a woman in her lifetime, hit a record low of 0.72. In the second quarter of 2024, the total fertility rate came to 0.71, which is the same as in the second quarter of 2023. When comparing the total number of births from January to June this year and last year, the number for this year fell by more than 3,000. The population also saw a natural decline of 8,700 in June, bigger than the figure for June 2023. Natural decline is calculated by subtracting the number of deaths from the number of births, and the country has seen a natural decline in the population since November 2019. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The combined attendance record for the KBO League has been broken yet again, surpassing 9 million for the first time in the league's 42-year history. According to the league on Wednesday, following fixtures on the same day, the 10 KBO League teams saw a total of 9,009,040 fans came up to the ballparks in the 610 games so far in 2024. This is thanks to the attendance for 6 out of 10 teams surpassing 1 million this season. Now, with 20 or so games remaining for each team, the league could see combined attendance surpass 10 million. The previous record for single-season attendance set 7 years ago was broken earlier this month.
Good morning, I'm Walter Lee, and this is The World Now. The Paris 2024 Paralympics is now underway, with the opening ceremony starting at 8 p.m. on Wednesday, local time. About 50,000 people watched the ceremony in the stands of the Place de la Concorde. More than 4,000 athletes with physical, visual, and intellectual impairments will compete in 22 sports from Thursday local time until September 8th. Just like the Summer Olympics, the opening ceremony for the Paralympics was, for the first time in history, held outside rather than in a stadium. During the ceremony, fighter planes flew overhead, leaving red, white and blue vapors in the colors of the French national flag before the delegations entered the square. Lucky Love, a French singer who was born with one arm, was joined by performers in wheelchairs when he sang on stage. Then, as the national anthem played, the obelisk lit up in the colors of the French flag. Organizers say more than 2 million of the 2.8 million tickets have been sold for the various Paralympic events. The first medals handed out on Thursday will be in taekwondo, table tennis, swimming, and track and cycling. Athletes are grouped by impairment levels to ensure as level a playing field as possible. Berkshire Hathaway, the conglomerate led by investor Warren Buffett, has surpassed $1 trillion in market value. This places Berkshire Hathaway in an exclusive group of just 6 other companies, including Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. It is also the only one of the trillion-dollar group that isn't a big tech company. Buffett, who is just about to turn 94, has been at the helm of Berkshire since 1965. Under his leadership, the company's shares have skyrocketed by over 5.6 million%, an annual growth of 20%. Berkshire Hathaway's vast portfolio includes brands like American Express, Coca-Cola, and Bank of America, along with a significant stake in Apple, despite selling off more than half of its shares this year. Despite donating over half of his shares to charity, Buffett still owns over 14% of the company. His net worth is estimated at $145 billion, making him the 6th richest person in the world, according to Forbes. The second quarter results for tech giant Nvidia have gone above expectations. The company's earnings report showed adjusted earnings of 68 cents per share and $30 billion in revenue. This surpassed analysts' expectations of 64 cents per share earnings and $28.8 billion revenue. Nvidia also projected third quarter revenue of $32.5 billion, which is above analysts' predictions. The company also approved a 50 billion share buyback, but despite the strong numbers, Nvidia's stock dropped 6% following the announcement. The 81st Venice Film Festival kicked off Wednesday local time with a star-studded gala, drawing filmmakers and cinema enthusiasts from across the globe. Hollywood legend Sigourney Weaver, known for her roles in Alien and Avatar, was honored with the Golden Lion Lifetime Achievement Award. Weaver's celebrated career spans 5 decades of critical and commercial success. Following the ceremony, attendees of the festival were treated a premiere screening of Tim Burton's Beetlejuice.
Good morning. Typhoon Shanshan is approaching the island of Kyushu in western Japan, bringing rough weather to the southwest coast of Japan this morning. The typhoon will also indirectly impact parts of Korea's South and East Sea, with high sea watches and a typhoon warning being in place. Also, a strong wind advisory has been issued to Busan and nearby areas, as well as Jeju Island this morning. Please double-check your travel schedules in case of any cancellations or delays. Strong easterly winds will bring showers to the east coast and Jeju Island with up to 60 millimeters in the forecast until Friday. Meanwhile, midsummer heat returns to western parts of Korea, with Seoul and Gwangju expected to top out at 34 degrees Celsius this afternoon under sunny skies with very strong UV rays. And Daegu gets up to 31, Busan, Jeju topping out at 32 degrees Celsius. Now, those of us in the capital area need to brace for heat throughout the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.